Hello and welcome to the Perfect Record. We're here today. I'm here today with Rob to talk about last night's boxing. And first off, we start with two heavyweights in the peak of their powers, right, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. Top of the division. I mean, you can tell from the sarcasm that it was completely the opposite. Just two shot to pieces fighters. It was fun. It was fun to watch though. It was in parts enjoyable. There was some big punches landed. Chisora got wobbled. Pulev got rattled a couple of times. So there was parts that were fun to watch, but the quality to be a main event at the O2, it just isn't good enough, really. I don't think. And like I said, I know some people might disagree with this. I know a few people have scored the fight differently, but I think it was a bit of a robbery, to be perfectly honest. I think 8 rounds to 4 win for Pulev would have been satisfactory. You know, maybe you could say it was a round closer or a draw, but to suggest that Chisora won 8 rounds where he spent 7 rounds just languishing on the ropes, waiting for one punch, whereas Pulev landed 6 or 7. I can't justify that being enough to pick up rounds. But I thought the commentary last night was really poor. David Hay, clearly biased. He had Tony Bellew scoring the fight, who was ringside screaming at Derek Chisora, and then somehow managing to score the fight, which was just ridiculous. And of course, he gave it to Chisora. I think what it proved is we're kind of correct last week in saying Pulev's defence has never been good. It's always let him down on the bigger stage. And I thought, yet again, even though Del Boy was winging him punches from miles away, and like we said last week jokingly, that he could, you know, basically go and get a drink from his dressing room and come back and the punch still wouldn't have landed. But Pulev's hands are just so far away from his chin. He just, and his feet aren't quick enough to get out of range. He just took punches flush on the chin. And he was a brave man, as was Chisora. You know, you can't fault the determination and you know, from both fighters, but the quality you do have to question. I thought Del did better work under Don Charles. Like I've always said, the best Chisora is under Don Charles, where he's like using that crossover defence where he kind of like lets bombs go and then kind of nullifies their opponent's work and limits uppercuts by crossing his arms over and not taking anything flush. And that's kind of like Del Boy at his best. So he did box to a good enough standard last night, but just not good enough to pick up the victory in my eyes. But what would you say? I think you call it a draw, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought it was a draw, but I think that they were always going to give it to Del, aren't they? Because lost 3 in a row, they're going to try and, if it's a close one, they were always going to link it to that. But it's got to the stage now where he's got the win, but it doesn't help him really, does it? Because obviously, ideally, you'd think, finish on a high, finally win a fight against a decent opposition, arguably when you've avenged a defeat, sail off. But obviously, now they're going to bang the Chisora train yet again and try and throw him in with someone. I mean, the fact they're calling out Wilder is just silly and dangerous for him. But what other fun fights are there out there for him? Because obviously he's still a gatekeeper and he's becoming a weaker gatekeeper as the fights go on. Obviously, that they could try and push for a White 3, maybe. I don't know. But obviously, I'm not sure because obviously White on the back of a loss, Chisora back on a win. But other than that, who else could he go in there with where it's like realistic?
And who can he go in there with who he's not already lost to? He's already been beaten by pretty much everyone in the top 15, obviously other than Kubrat Pulev, who he managed to beat. But I think Dillian Whyte might make sense for both men if Whyte still fancies a career in the game. Obviously, he's slipped a long way as Dillian Whyte. He's only won once in the past couple of years, and that was against a really faded Alexander Povetkin. And the effort that he put forward against Tyson Fury was, in my eyes, piss poor. So he's shot to pieces as well, really, in a lot of ways, is Dillian Whyte, but probably has a bit more in the tank left than Del Boy. So I suppose that would be a fight that people would watch. It was a pay-per-view at one point. So I suppose that's an option to go down. Like you said, Deontay Wilder's just completely irrational and dangerous, and it makes you wonder. Del Boy's obviously delusional about his talents and whatnot, but people around him also encouraging him. You can see it, like the whole kind of Matchroom bandwagon getting up behind him, blowing smoke up his ass when he doesn't need that anymore. He needs somebody to take it away from him. And like you say, hopefully we thought that could have won in the form of a victory. Yes, he got a win, a very close win last night, and he could say that's basically him at the peak of his powers, and that's the best he can do. And to walk away on a high now would be satisfactory. But to step up any more level, even a small step up in level, it's just going to get painful for him. So, but again, there's nothing anybody can do or say to stop him. I don't think at this stage. I think he's at risk, the biggest risk to himself, really. As for Pulev, a few people have said linking him to other fights, and apparently Pulev's calling out a rematch. He's 41 years old now, Pulev. He's lost his most important fights, I think, losing to Joshua for a world title, lost to Klitschko for a world title, and last night was his chance at getting himself back in the title picture again, and obviously was beaten by somebody who's been well beaten 12, 13 times. So I think it's also time for Pulev to pack it up.
Yeah, definitely. I think I saw a Barry Hearn interview from last night where he said he should retire, but he won't. And then when asked about the Wilder fight, he said he'd probably lose. And I mean, if you're already going into that, then I think that the White fight kind of makes sense because their styles naturally do gel, aren't they? They're both just plodders who try and just pressure and walk forward, walk their man down. So their styles do gel. And I do think that the turning point in White was when he left Mark Tibbs and joined up with that Xavier Miller, because his performances since, you've seen a stark contrast where there has been a bit of a decline. So it is an interesting fight, but you'd surely have to favour White as just the younger man.
I still think it's dangerous because in the 8th round, Pulev very nearly got rid of Derek Chisora, and let's be honest here, he was shot to pieces, was Pulev. He couldn't let his shots go, and that's a sign of a fighter who's basically close to retirement. I remember Vladimir Klitschko looking very similar when he was against Tyson Fury. He just couldn't pull the trigger, and I felt that was the issue with Pulev last night. But he still managed to rattle Del Boy, and he still managed to just nearly stop him in the 8th round. So I could only imagine what a Dillian Whyte or somebody who will let the shots go, what they will do to him. But like you said, even his own team are acknowledging the fact that he's not going to win. So why arrange fights at this level? It's bizarre, but it's making them money, isn't it? And that's what makes the boxing world go around.
Thankfully, I don't think it will happen because obviously Eddie Hearn doesn't have the best track record working with Showtime. And how many Deontay Wilder fights has Eddie Hearn tried to make it in the last few years and not been able to pull any of them off? So hopefully, but the thing is, Chisora wants far more money than his ability, doesn't he? So he's going to have to, if he wants to keep earning that sort of money, he'd have to fight another top 10 bloke.
Yeah, and get some results. I mean, really, if he wants that sort of money, he needs to be beating a Joseph Parker or someone really, isn't it? Because Parker's a top 10 heavyweight and Parker didn't have any problems with beating him. So I think that goes to show what level Del Boy's at.
Yeah, let's hope that he retires. I just want to touch on the undercard, and not just last night, just in general of late of British boxing. I don't know about you, but don't you think the quality of undercard has really been weak in the last few months?
Yeah, it's falling off a cliff. I mean, obviously we made reference to Boxer and their undercards being particularly poor, but even Eddie Hearn's followed suit, where as before, he'd have like British title fights on the undercard, for example, with Cheeseman, Williamson on the undercard of Fowler versus Smith. Cracking fight, So this is another card where the headline is not a world title fight. It's not a high quality contest. So you'd assume Hearn would do something similar and try and bulk up this card. I mean, of course, he had the Felix Cash fight fall apart, which he wasn't to know about. But Fabio Wardley, like we were mentioning before the pod, is a really decent heavyweight coming up to British level who needs to be tested. Obviously, every time he's stepped him up in level. He's knocked out his opponent, so step him up in another level and put him in against somebody better. But it didn't get an opponent till the week, and then that opponent pulled out, and then it left him with some bin man from Rochdale that he managed to turn over in a couple of rounds. There's not much Hearn really could have done about that Sorrow fight where it was a cut and it went to the cards. But even if that was a high quality contest, the card still would have been disappointing, I think. And, you know, is it just because we're going through a dry spell in the summer of boxing? It's not really in season currently, possibly. But I think some of the problems is not finding opponents in time, announcing far too often. It happens where you announce a card and you have no opposition. Like Frank Warren does it so many times. You cannot announce a card and then not select a fighter until the week of the fight, can you? Because A, that fighter hasn't had a camp, so they're going to be turning up in absolutely no shape whatsoever. And B, there's nothing to get hyped for, or there's no build up at all. So I think that kind of that phase that we're in boxing now of announcing fights before opponents been found needs to change drastically.
I think one of the main problems is as well because particularly in the UK, obviously when Eddie Hearn was at Sky, he had the lion's share of the fighters, so he could basically make the fights with ease. Do you know what I mean? In-house ones or bring opponents in. But now the market, there's so many platforms. Is stable is getting thinner, isn't it? Which it could be an issue, and that's probably why he put the Majidov Sorrow fight on.
And the fact that you get the likes of Frank Warren saying to a young promoter who's basically said they're willing to work with anyone and saying, don't, you know, basically laughing at him saying you'll never get one of our fighters on one of your shows. That's the problem with boxing. You know what I mean? That attitude there from old man Warren is the problem in boxing.
Yeah, and it's hopefully that there comes a way to rectify it because it's going to be carrying on for a while. It's going to stop big fights, isn't it?
Well, it has, hasn't it, over the years, you know. The Errol Spence Terence Crawford fight is the most obvious fight to make in boxing, and it's still not come together. And that just summarises the times we live in. Yeah.
Now carrying on with TV broadcasters and everything. I thought AJ had signed for DAZN and signed his life away to them, Rob. How come he's fighting on Sky then?
I have absolutely no idea how this has all come together. I've seen it been announced, but I've not done any research into it whatsoever. I believe the reasoning behind it is didn't Eddie Hearn sell all the television rights to the Saudi who managed to get the fight over there, and then that Saudi has then resold the fight to the highest bidder, which was Sky, apparently. If that is the case, then it's a huge blow for DAZN, isn't it? So just to clarify again, like I said, I haven't done a lot of research into it. Does this mean AJ Usyk 2 isn't on DAZN?
I don't know. I don't know about outside or American broadcasters or anything, to be honest. But yeah, to be fair, I just don't get it though, because why would DAZN put this massive thing out how they've signed Joshua, and then his next fight is not even on that platform, and it's on the platform that he was on before. It's baffling. But how do you reckon the card will work? Will Eddie Hearn promote it? Will Sky and Ben Shalom have a bit of a say now?
Well, you'd have to assume it's an Eddie Hearn card, wouldn't you? Really, I thought that was the case going in, but very much like, for example, when Tyson Fury boxed against Vladimir Klitschko and Tyson Fury was with Hennessy Sports, Sky ended up winning the bid, didn't they, to have it on their television show. But actually, thinking back to it, that actually went through Vladimir Klitschko's promoter, and he promoted the event. So it's not exactly clear who's going to promote it unless Sky just have the television rights, and that's the be all and end all of the rights. But if that is the case, then it's another huge blow for DAZN.
Yeah, and I mean, they can't really buy much luck at the minute, can they? I just don't see how it's a fruitful decision tying AJ and giving him so much power and money DAZN by doing this, because let's say, as many believe, Usyk to beat AJ in the rematch, which is on Sky Sports, and then Sky can go, oh, there you go, there's AJ. What can be left for him if he's lost back to Usyk?
Well, I mean, the thing is, he's still a personality in boxing, although we're well aware he has absolutely no personality. But he's still well known. He's still like the face of British boxing anyway. So I still think people would pay to see him and sell out stadiums to see him box. It's just, at what level will that be at? Will it be against Tyson Fury, which would probably be the obvious fight remaining for both guys? Or will Fury be able to box against AJ if he does lose against Usyk? So you are right, though. The amount of options that AJ has left to take isn't particularly large at this point. Will he want to get hyped up for a fight against Joe Joyce? Probably not. So, like you say, it's a huge risk to put on a man whose next contest is literally the make or break point of his professional boxing career.
No, but that's it as well. Like, obviously, there are a few fights out there domestically within a White rematch or Joyce, like you mentioned. But if he fought Joyce, there's no way Frank Warren's letting that go on to DAZN, is he?
Well, then that takes that fight off the cards, doesn't it? And then the other name is Daniel Dubois, who obviously is getting closer to a world title shot with the WBA. Now what would happen if Dubois got in there? That's another kind of muddy area. You know, it doesn't leave a lot of options left for AJ unless he was to box against an American. My personal selection would be Deontay Wilder, but again, you've already mentioned the difficulties Hearn had in securing that fight previously.
Yeah, so it's must win, isn't it, really, for AJ? It's basically, obviously, he can rebuild, come again. Obviously, he needs to, the way his career trajectory is going at the minute, he needs to change something within himself to get that, just revert back to his old style and be more willing and less fearful of getting hit. But is it like, you can't really, obviously his name's already semi-tarnished by losing to Usyk, but if he loses to Usyk again, it's a long road back, isn't it?
I think the main problem as well, going back to the casual fan, is the casual fan doesn't have a clue who Usyk is. Now, within boxing, we all know Usyk is a unified champion at cruiserweight, an Olympic gold medalist. He's a top quality boxer who would cause any fighter at heavyweight problems. Even Tyson Fury would cause problems. So we're all well aware that Usyk's a problem. But to anybody else, a casual fan looking in, they'll just look at some shaven-headed Eastern European who can't speak a word of the Queen's and be like, who is this bum? You know, so from that aspect, it's not going to do much good for AJ whatsoever if he was to lose to Usyk again. The main problem is, and I've banged on about it before, is I've never liked immediate rematches in boxing. I just don't see the point in taking it, especially if you've been well beaten in your last fight. Why take an immediate rematch? Why not go away, try and build yourself up with a new training, have some time to work with Robert Garcia and build up this new aggressive Joshua style. Don't just immediately go into a rematch with a guy who's just comfortably beating you. It's the worst thing you can do, and that was the reason David Price's career was over with, because after he lost to Tony Thompson twice, that was the end of Price's hype train, weren't it? So although Joshua's on a different level to Price, it's a similar kind of feel to it, this rematch.
Yeah, like definitely. It have made a lot more sense to get like a White rematch in the middle, or even maybe like an Otto Warling, just a southpaw, so he can see if how he can adapt. Obviously not as not as good southpaw, but do you know what I mean? So he's fully prepared for it, rather than just fighting like, what's it, 9, 10 months later, just with the same opponent.
Yeah, but with additional ring rust, it just doesn't make any sense.
Now on to a fight which fell through yet again. Tommy Fury obviously got dealt the Kinahan hand of being unable to travel to America for the fight. But I've got to say, fair play to Jake Paul, announcing Hasim Rahman Jr. Obviously, he's had amateur background, which Tommy Fury didn't really have. Obviously, got knocked out by Tommy Morrison's son, so he's not the best. He's not the best level, but he's a heavyweight, so he's not being a weight bully, Jake Paul, and it's a good replacement and arguably a tougher fight, wouldn't you say, Rob?
Honestly, I don't know where he's pulled this guy from. It's it's almost the ideal replacement, because is he not just, he's just basically Tommy Fury, but with less of a following, isn't he, really? He's just related to a boxing legend in Hasim Rahman, just like Tommy Fury was with Tyson. And for that reason, he gains a little bit more traction. Has had quite a few easy fights in his career to build up a record that looks respectable. You know, it basically is the ideal replacement for Tommy Fury. And the other thing is, he's already sparred with him, so he already knows what he brings to the table. So obviously they must have seen something in sparring that suggests that he'll be a not a comfortable win, but an achievable result for Jake Paul. Obviously, I don't know a lot. My surprise was I didn't even know Hasim Rahman had a son who was boxing. So I've gone away and done some research and watched his fight against Tommy Morrison's son, and I don't rate him whatsoever, to be completely honest with you. I don't think he's absolutely awful. He's a switch hitter. He's going forwards, throwing punches. He's quite good. Like, he's quite crafty with how he throws his shots, but he has absolutely no engine at all, which is obviously a good thing for Jake Paul, because it's an 8-rounder and he could stop him down the stretch. And he has no footwork and no defence. So he's somebody who I would say would be susceptible to being knocked out, and that is basically what Jake Paul's building up his record to be, a puncher's record, isn't it? So I don't think he's stupid by any means, Jake Paul. I think this is just yet again more clever marketing for him, selecting somebody who can say that they're a professional, but has a little bit of reputation, but he's boxing on the absolute lowest level and has only ever picked up wins against journeymen who were, lost 17, won 5, for example. So he's not been in there against any competitive opponents other than one, and he was well beaten by him. So I think it's very clever from Paul.
Yeah, I think that it really does well for his marketability for the casual fan, doesn't it? Because now by beating him, he'll say he's beaten a fighter, he beat a heavy guy, had amateur background. So it ticks another box to make people want to still follow it. And then I'm sure they'll try and magic up this Tommy Fury fight again, which I can't see ever happening, to be honest.
No, I can't. I think it's passed by now. Like I said, the only thing that might not be true about that statement is finding guys like Rahman isn't easy, is it? Like, there isn't loads and loads of these guys waiting around who are really low level, but yet have some sort of following in boxing, like Tommy Fury. So maybe he does get desperate and select a Fury. But I think after beating Rahman, if he is to knock him out, let's say, then he might as well move on to a greater challenge, because who's to say Tommy Fury would be a bigger challenge than Rahman Jr.? Who knows? Rahman Jr. could easily beat Tommy Fury for all we know, because we don't know anything about where his ceiling is in boxing. So I think personally, Jake Paul, if he does manage to get a win against Rahman Jr., would then just be suited to move on to a greater level of opponent. Maybe somebody who was once a name at cruiserweight, is now 38, 39 years old, has been knocked out a couple of times, and somebody that he could roll over.
Like a Gulwatsky or something like that, maybe. Yeah. Or is that a bit too high level?
No, I mean, I don't. He's been out of the ring for 3 years or whatever. You catch him ring rusty. You catch him. He's been a former world champion. Obviously, he's got a bit of a reputation. He could be somebody. Yes, it's dangerous, but his career is well behind him now. So maybe, because obviously that's where we've seen Conor Benn build up his reputation. So we know that it's achievable.
Yeah, it can pull in the casual fans who don't really follow the sport, doesn't it?
Like, I mean, Conor Benn, obviously, I'm not aware of this at all, but some of the traction that he's getting on social media currently, like every one of his posts that he puts out gets mass response, doesn't it? So if that doesn't go to show like how well these sorts of people capture the imagination of the casual audience, then I don't know what does.
Yeah, just quickly touching on Conor Benn. Obviously, there's in the rumour mill that he's set to fight Chris Eubank Jr. in the autumn. What do you reckon? Are you interested? Are you in?
It's not particularly. I would watch it. I hate that Chris Eubank Jr. selects smaller opposition than himself at all times. Yet he talks the game like he should be boxing Golovkin in 12 months. Well, if you're preparing for Golovkin, why the fuck would you go with Conor Benn? Do you know what I mean? It's just complete bollocks. So that, although that does frustrate me, I think from a Conor Benn's point of view, he doesn't really have a lot to lose by taking this fight, because if it is, like you say, a catch weight of 155 pounds and Eubank Jr. is to beat him, he could just turn around there and say, well, I dared to be great. I stepped up 9 pounds in weight and was beaten by a bigger man. And it wouldn't really harm his reputation. A bit like when Kell Brook went in against Gennady Golovkin. Obviously, it did longer term damage that physically to Kell Brook, but taking all that aside, he actually gained reputation by boxing against Gennady Golovkin that night. It actually helped him improve his reputation. So possibly, you know, as crazy as it sounds, it might actually be a good idea for Conor Benn. What are your thoughts on it?
I think that I get it for Chris Eubank, because it's pretty obvious and clear by now that he's not interested, is he, in fighting a Triple G or an elite, trying to test himself against the best, because he's failed twice already. So he's just in it to basically, obviously he's got the Sky, he's one of the Sky's biggest names now, and he's just whoever he thinks can generate the most money. I think the only options out there, the problem he has is there's not many biggish names at the middleweight division who he can. Him and Felix Cash, it would be a great fight, but the risk and reward isn't there for him, is it, really? Because Cash isn't much of a name and he is dangerous. Whereas,
all right, actually, and even like at kind of contender level, there isn't even a lot of like middleweight contenders you can really think about, like Gabriel Rizardo, possibly. Other than that, I can't really think of many who's like that kind of build-up fight for him. So Eubank, like you say, Eubank Jr.'s options are in quite short supply currently.
Well, he's got three, I think. He's got Liam Smith, who's obviously just moved to Sky. He's got Billy Joe Saunders, who's set to be returning, but I doubt Saunders would make the 160 limit. And then obviously you've got Ben, purely based on their fathers, because I'm not even sure, do Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn have any beef or hatred, or is it solely just living off the backs of their dads?
No, but I'm sure that that they can fucking build something up, can't they, between them, because Conor Benn's the world's most intense man and Chris Eubank Jr. is the world's most dislikable man. So between them both, I'm sure they could get something going.
Yeah. How big is that fight? Is it a stadium fight, do you reckon, or is it just an O2? It'd definitely be pay-per-view.
I'll tell you what it'd be. It'd be a really good way of gauging where Conor Benn is right now, because a lot of people seem to believe that, like I mentioned before, with his social media following building up so rapidly, that he really is going to be a big ticket seller. So I don't think Eubank Jr. has a large following, and he's proven that throughout the years. So it will be interesting to see if where Conor Benn stands, because I think he'd be the one selling the majority of the tickets in that one.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit stuck though, Conor Benn, isn't he? Because obviously he's beaten the washed up guys who haven't fought in ages. But you're looking at it now, to help with the Conor Benn hype train, who could they really match him against? Because they're not going to go anywhere near Virgil Ortiz, Boots Ennis, are they? Obviously, Thurman, they keep shouting about, but let's remember he's on Showtime and he's still got a little bit left in him. Obviously, he came through and won recently. So they're his only options to step on from the sort of guys he's already facing. And obviously, until Crawford and Spence finally step foot in the ring against each other, he's not going to get that shot for a world title, isn't he? So they're just he's sort of waiting, I think.
Well, I think Hearn inadvertently started to give the game away when he started like saying like suggestions, like for example Maurice Harris they tried negotiating a fight with, they tried negotiating a fight with Jose Ramirez, and obviously what both them have in common is they're both 140s. You know what I mean? So I think
he tried it with Mikey Garcia as well, didn't he?
Yes. So I think his next ploy is to get somebody slightly more dangerous, but somebody that Conor Benn already has a suitable height and weight advantage on. And obviously with him being a big puncher, would the smaller man be able to take them shots? Is basically what he's doing. It's clever, we're protecting him. You could say he's boxing against a legitimate contender here, but obviously there's a big drop off in weight between 140 and 147 in my eyes. It's one of the biggest gaps in boxing weight. So I just think it would be possibly a step too far for some guys.
Who would you favour in that fight if it were to happen at 155? Obviously, Eubank's a bigger man, but he doesn't necessarily carry that power, that knockout power.
I think you'd have to back Eubank. I think there's just too many things against Conor Benn going in there. The weight disadvantage. He's never boxed at this level before, even though Eubank isn't at a particularly high level. We need to remember that Conor Benn has only ever beaten guys who were already finished at that stage in the career. So I think you'd have to back Eubank Jr. with the weight advantage and his experience.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you on that. Now on to an announcement that Ben Shalom and Boxer made this week with their women's card. Obviously, Baumgardner and Michaela Mayer had already been sorted, but Shields and Marshall finally, after waiting around for months and months, building it up, has finally been agreed and signed for September, which looks so far to be what's going to be a good card, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and it's already getting quite a lot of hype in the press and stuff, which is a good thing, because Clarissa Shields, although she calls herself the GWAT and has, one of the better records in female boxing, doesn't have a following, and we already know that Savannah Marshall isn't a particularly big personality and doesn't really have a great following in this country either. So you're not really getting any ticket sellers there, but people are genuinely interested in this one because it is what they're saying it is the best fight in women's boxing. It's really the only fight that I now want to see in women's boxing. Anything else is just second best when it comes to this kind of clash of styles. So no, I'm really hyped for it. I think it's probably up there. Obviously Usyk AJ, you'll have to say, is maybe top of the list, seconded by Canelo, Golovkin, 3. But then you'd have to put into that bracket the Shields Marshall fight in the top 3 most anticipated fights of the year. It's and of course making that card as well with the Baumgardner Mayer. The only other thing I was thinking is, what about getting Natasha Jonas versus Hannah Rankin on the undercard as well and making it a 3-way world title header? Yeah,
well, that's a fight that does make a lot of sense, doesn't it? To be fair, they're both on that platform, I believe. But I think Caroline Dubois is on that card as well, isn't she? I think weirdly I think she's boxing back-to-back weekends, which shows the level of opponents I'm expecting.
What, for Dubois? She's boxing.
I think she's boxing last week of August and then that card as well. So maybe a week or 2, but yeah, 2 weeks apart.
Well, getting some exposure. I mean, I always hate that in boxing when that does happen. It's always leaving the potential for a banana skin into it, but you can only assume the level of competition they're going to bring in there for Dubois.
On the women's card, do you believe that they should have men on it, or do you reckon it makes more of a statement if it's all women? Because obviously they want to be equal and have similar levels, so should they be sharing cards with men?
Yeah, I don't think it's relevant really. I think it would prove more if they did put on a pretty decent men's fight, like a British level fight on the undercard of this, because it would prove that the women's fight genuinely is the better quality. If you see what I mean. I get what they're trying to do here, Sky, and make this push and whatnot, but I just think it is like you said. It's the search isn't for bringing in as many female fighters as possible and putting on female-only shows. The push is for an equal kind of playing field for both. And if this is a world title fight in the women's game, in comparison to a British level fight in the men's game, it deserving to headline the card. That would be my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think similar. And I do think that Mayer Baumgardner is not getting enough traction, I don't think, because it's an undercard fight. But that's that's arguably the 3rd biggest available fight in women's boxing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is like, Mayer, as much as Bob Arum doesn't particularly like female boxing, has managed to build up Mayer quite well over in the States. She's got in there with some elite level opponents and managed to pick up the victory. I don't think she's an unbelievable fighter, but I do think she's a good level. And Baumgartner's come over here and smashed through one of our most elite boxers in the women's game in Terry Harper, and then come over again and absolutely schooled somebody. So that, again, like you say, that is another high level fight. And I'm not sure, do they hold all the belts at that weight class? Would that be a unification as well, or is it not Callie Reese who holds another belt? Come to think of it, actually, so it might not be a unification, but still, like you said, one of the best possible women's fights that could be made.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that Shields Marshall, just a clash of styles, and obviously it's nice to have a bit of build up in women's fights, isn't it? I think this one, Shields Marshall, is the first fight I can remember in women's boxing that's actually had a little bit of needle.
Oh yeah, it's genuine needle as well, isn't it? You know, you can tell, like, Clarissa Shields, although Savannah Marshall keeps picking out that amateur success against her, it does get under the skin of Shields, doesn't it? It does rattle her a little bit. And obviously Shields doesn't really need to defend her amateur record or professional record, but she feels obliged to, doesn't she? Because she is that sort of personality, where, like a bit of a Mayweather type personality, where something like that, some failure in the life, to bring it up to them consistently, is going to get a rise out of him. And I think there is a genuine disliking between the two. You know, I did watch the press conference, and I did find it engaging. There is, like you said, genuine needle there, and it'll be good. There's obviously the risk of a knockout as well, which you don't really get. You know, like every single Katie Taylor fight, you know, is going to go 10-round distance, don't you? You know that no matter what, it's going to be close on cards, and it's going to go 10 rounds. But on this fight, it could be over in 3 rounds. It could go the distance.
Yeah, I mean, I bet obviously Sky could have really pushed for this event by making this fight 3-minute rounds, don't they? But I'm not sure Shields would have fancied that, with having the extra minute in a round where she could get detonated by one of Savannah's right hands.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that really goes in her favour in this one, because when you compare it to a 12-round men's fight, that lasts 36 minutes, whereas this is only 20 minutes. So it does give her a significant advantage, I think.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to that September the 10th. Now, just to build up on next week's action, pretty quiet, obviously, as it's the summer months approaching, but old Frank Warren does have a card on with Lennox Clark v Mark Heffron, which is a decent fight, to be fair, for Frank, isn't it, Rob? To be fair, obviously Clark off the back of beating Hutchinson for, is it the British belt? And obviously Heffron, he's always in tough fights, isn't he?
Yeah, I think this is a good level fight. Just like you said, if this was like headlining a Channel 5 card, you know, we'd be praising this as a pretty decent level scrap. I do favour Lennox Clark coming into it. He does have a bit more form coming in, because obviously the last time we've seen Mark Heffron fight, for myself anyway, was against Denzel Bentley, where he got that horrendous eye injury, that swelling, and he couldn't see out of it, and that's why he got pulled out in the 4th round. But yeah, he is a good British level fighter, and as is Lennox Clark. Obviously, Clark's last win against Willie Hutchinson was a huge shock, so I do favour Clark to win this one. He is a tough man, though. He's Heffron. I know he did get pulled out of that fight through no choice of his own. And I remember watching him box against Liam Williams, and he got beat up for like 10, 11 rounds before being stopped. So I can envision him going the distance and losing on points to Lennox Clark in a tight one.
I fancy Lennox Clark to dispatch of him in the mid rounds, to be honest. I think that Clark is better. Obviously, he's fought, I'd probably say, higher opposition. Obviously, he lost a split decision to Lerone Richards. Obviously, in better form currently. I'm just looking now. Mark Heffron's last 2 are against losing records, and I just think that Lennox Clark is a naturally bigger man, isn't he? I think he's fought at light heavy before, whereas obviously Heffron's primarily been a middleweight. So I just think the bigger man will just get to Heffron. Also,
I don't think there's a lot else on that card, is there? I think Frank's wheeling out some of his younger boys, and Shiraz on it as well.
Yeah, Hamza Shiraz, and obviously he's being rebuilt now after that one against Bradley Skeet where he hit him when he was down. But do you think that Shiraz can eventually mix it with the big boys in the middleweight division?
Yeah, I was really liking the way, the direction that Shiraz were going. He's obviously a massive, light middle. He's huge for that weight, and he probably should be stepping up at some point to a bigger weight. But he is only 23 years old, is it? I think Bradley Skeet is a really good high-level boxer. He's boxed for European titles. He's boxed and won British titles. He's a really awkward style, and you're not going to get every opponent box the way that Bradley Skeet does. And he gives Shiraz loads of problems, didn't he? Going into the later rounds, you'd probably say that he was well up, was Bradley Skeet, until Shiraz did manage to drop him. But of course, the shot that did all the damage was when he was on the floor. So it's really hard to tell whether Shiraz would have legitimately been able to knock him out and stop him, because if it did go to points, all Skeet needed to do was just stand up and he'd get to points, and he probably would have won it on the card. So that's the only real blip against Shiraz's name so far in his career. And I just think that's a learning fight for a young fighter. He's got through it now, and he'll go on to bigger and better, because I do quite like Shiraz. I think he's good at all ranges. He's good on the inside. He's good at long range. He picks his punches well. He's clever. He's cute defensively. I thought his footwork did let him down slightly against Skeet, but like I keep saying, Skeet, you're not going to box against a guy who fights the way he does with that style every time, are you? So I do think Shiraz will go on to have a pretty good career in the professional game. What about you?
Yeah, I think he is arguably one of the top prospects in the country at the moment. But I think that after this fight, I think they do need a sort of a name to try and catapult him up there. Obviously, they tried to do it with Skeet, which I think they thought he's on a 3-month layoff. He was retired, he's just come back, he's beat bin men, and he's naturally a smaller guy. Do you know what I mean? Tried to maneuver it that way, and there is still a question mark over him. So I think that they do need to find someone, preferably a domestic clash, to get in there. Maybe try and fight the British title. Obviously, I think Felix Cash has got it, but I don't expect him to be holding that British title for too much longer. Obviously, there's Liam Williams, who looked like he could be a bit shot to pieces in the last Eubank fight. The way his chin just didn't hold up, that could be a decent name for him.
Yeah, all right. It looks like he has stepped up in weight in his last contest, hasn't he? So he's now boxing at middle, which really gives him less options than boxing at light middle, because there's plenty of guys there. One name that I was going to put forward to, and I think he's also gone to middleweight, would be Anthony Fowler. I think that fight was close to getting on, and I think that would be like a bit of a good crossroads fight for both of them guys. But will Frank Warren put on a genuine 50-50 on one of his cards with a DAZN fighter? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I just hope that Shiraz doesn't do what the likes of Fowler, and I believe that Kieran Conway's done it as well, where they're coming from like middle, but then they don't make the middleweight limit, so they have to make the fight at like a catch weight of 163 or 64. Do you know what I mean? So hopefully he can make that weight his natural weight, and see where he goes for the future. And on that note, I think that draws everything to a close. So see you all again next week, guys.
Yeah, see you guys. So.